Okay. So officially, good morning, namaste, but it's also afternoon for some of you. Before we even get started today, as I usually invite us into, let's just sit for a moment. And whether you are joining live or you're watching the recording, really allowing ourselves to just drop in here fully and take a moment. So I welcome you to close the eyes and let the body find its own gentle comfort. And as we reside here, not asking anything of this moment, but instead there is an access, availability to the sense of being alive now. And an intimacy with life's pulse, life's force now. An intimacy with the sense of embodiment, all of the sensations of this body, and an intimacy with the breath being breathed, life as she naturally makes her way to innervate and enliven the whole system. And an intimacy with the field of interconnection, all of the ways in which we know that we are not separate. We feel this intimate connection to life now, maybe the sounds or the smells, the feeling of the space around us. All of this is here now. And as today's topic is relating to Raja, relating to the menstruation, just allowing the attention to dwell down into the space of the yoni, the whole area of the womb, the vaginal canal, the vagina, this whole area, bringing our attention there and feeling her now. Feeling the life force that is here. Hearing what she has to tell us now. Just simply giving a basking attention to this area. And then just let yourself rest for a moment as I come to chant, and you can allow this just to settle into your being, just a way for us to really open the space together. Om Sahana Bhavatu, Sahana Bhunaktu, Saha Viryam Karavavahe, Tejasvinavaditamastu, Ma Vidvishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Ultimately, this is a peace prayer asking, may we all be in great peace. May all that's shared here be for great peace. Let's enjoy one more nice full breath there. And then as it feels right, coming to open the eyes, finding our way into the space together. So the topic for today is this one of menstruation and how to have a healthy menstruation. I just want to check in with those of you who are live and online that you can hear me okay and that everything is flowing for you. Okay, great. Really, really good. Yes. Okay, wonderful. So this is a topic that we could take much more time than this short webinar together for, but it's one I often get requests around, and we've been offering more and more of these kind of smaller webinars. And then of course, there are also longer courses, or and I always need to say this, if there are the specificities for you of challenges around the field of menstruation or menopause, anything in our lives, Of course, the webinar is helpful in that it can open us into some ideas and understandings of the way in which Ayurveda comes to this. But it's really important also to be able to nourish and nurture that individually. So to see someone, whether it's an Ayurvedic doctor or a naturopath or someone that you choose and you feel deeply aligned with and to. So obviously I can't answer every single personal question. And sometimes we come to these with that hope and yearning, which I understand entirely. But we'll see if there's some time also for questions. I'm going to introduce the Ayurvedic understanding of menstruation and some of the things that can be done with some of the common arisings that happen for each one of us. But then from there, if there are more specific things that are arising for you, do either reach out privately to me or find someone that you can work with in love and in presence. Okay, welcome. And this will be recorded also, and those of you watching the video later, welcome as well. I feel the beauty of us being able to have this capacity to share in this way. So let's dive right in and look at this. You know, this morning when I was sitting with the sharing of this topic and the question that I often get, which is how to heal or how to work with various menstrual challenges or problems. The very question and the place that it arises from is that it often arises from a more allopathic, if I can say symptomatic approach. Like, there's something wrong in my menstruation. Can you give me some kind of pill or herb or specific practice to look there directly? And although we absolutely offer this and have this in Ayurveda, the menstruation, just like any other relocation of dis-ease, of lack of ease, any other relocation of vitiation, of imbalance in this embodiment and also in this mind, is due to a root imbalance. So the manifestation of our menstruation being in one way or another, whether it's healthy, balanced, or wherever it might move, actually, is a direct representation of what's happening in the entirety of our being, what's happening under the surface in the entirety of our being. And Ayurveda approaches each and every dis-ease or each and every imbalance in this way, understanding that it's a symptom of a deeper, wider breadth of cause. And that cause arises from an imbalance of the energetics, the elemental energies in our system. And I don't have the time in the webinar to go completely over the understanding of what we call in Ayurveda Prakriti and Vikruti, which means that we have a constitutional, unchanging nature, Prakriti. We have our original blueprint constitution. And we also have a Vikruti. We have our current state, what's happening now. And anytime when we're applying the gift of Ayurvedic wisdom and Ayurvedic medicine, we always look to the field of what is origination for this individual. What is it for this person to be in naturalness? What is their dosha? And many of us have heard this word. This word is the kind of quintessential number one, infamous word that Ayurveda has gotten known for. So what's their dosha? Is it Vata, Pitta, Kapha, or a combination of those? What are the elements that usually live and express through this unique being in their physicality, in their physiology, but also in their emotionality and also in their mentality? And we can see this, and this is a whole other topic to engage in. And you can go onto the Rasa website also to see lots and lots and lots of offerings that we have that clarify around the doshas. But in Ayurveda, we always look to see what is the original constitution in which anything is occurring, anything is expressing, whether harmony is expressing or disharmony is expressing in a being. And then understanding that can help us to understand what is a natural expression. So for example, for one person having a menstruation that is more slow and steady, and what I mean by that is there may be a steadiness, like an ongoing scheduling throughout their entirety of their lives. There's been a 28-day schedule. But also that the bleed may come slowly. It has a slow kind of crescendoing in the days that we are bleeding, or even it comes slowly at the beginning of the life in menarche. So when we're beginning our menstruation, maybe it takes some time to mature. This kind of what we could call earthy way or kapha way of menstruation expressing with that slowed steadiness has its own unique place. And in certain women, that will be the expression. That will be a natural expression. Whereas for another woman, if there's more heat in the system, more fire, what we might call pitta in the system, then we might notice that the expression of various things, including her menstruation, will be different. So her expression may look more quick. So for example, the cycles can be shorter. They could be 24 days, 25 days, 26 days. They could have this shortness, and the bleed can come on fast and strong. And if we apply this conditioned idea that health or that healthfulness can be ascribed as looking one way, or one size fits all, or one suit fits all. And this is often in a symptomatic approach, how things are achieved. There's much less, or how things are looked upon. There's much less bio-individuality. There's much less recognition of diversity. And so if we look at it in that way, we would see these two manifestations of menstruation and say, well, one is right and one has to be wrong then necessarily. That presupposes this. But actually what Ayurveda and all traditional medicine, including the roots of allopathic medicine, all traditional medicine recognized this individuality, the constitutional uniqueness of various beings. And that constitutional uniqueness will mean that the plays out of the expressions out of the various things that we express in the masculine and in the feminine form, and as beings in general, will look different dependent upon your constitution. The way someone eats versus the way someone else eats. The bodily holding, so the way in which someone holds their body, just even the sentiment of holding, the way the body looks, one's expressions. There are so many ways in which we determine constitutionally the uniqueness of beings. And menstruation follows suit. There's nothing different in this. So I want to start there because I often hear that women are all looking for one pointed answer to what a healthy menstruation should look like, right? We use this big word, should, often. And instead to really have this glory and this graciousness of recognizing that Ayurveda sees that we are all different, that there is a diversity. Now, and saying that, even though there is a diversity in our beings, and thus this elemental diversity expresses into menstruation, showing up in different ways, for each constitution, there is balance and imbalance. So even though there's a uniqueness, there is something that can be known as healthfulness, as what we call swastha, as being situated in ourselves, being situated in our balanced, harmonious place, versus something that can look like an imbalance, what we call a vikruti, something in the current state that can look less than harmonious to one's nature. So I think it's really important to start here because yes, there can be a diversity of expressions, absolutely. Constitutionally, and we're going to go through these, constitutionally we see different expressions of menstruation, but there are also harmonious expressions, ones that are aligned to one's constitution in a way that maintains swastha, healthfulness. And then there are other manifestations that are truly and clearly a vikruti, that are truly and clearly an imbalance in the structure. They're a vitiation. And determining that and knowing that, right? Knowing, okay, well, this is just my uniqueness, that my period comes a little bit quicker versus now my period's coming every 20 days, or now my period's coming for 20 days and the bleed is super, super intense and long. That would be what we'd say is a pitta vitiation. It's a pitta imbalance. But if you have a consistent period, as I do, for example, that rolls around 25, 26 days, this is very common for pitta women. And then we hear that we should be having it, right? Every 28 days, that it should be. So something must be wrong with me. But actually, sitting with thousands of women over the years, it's been so beautiful to see the differences that appear in each one of us. So it's just like when I talk about sexuality and the sexual expression, similarly, the way in which we orgasm, the way in which orgasm expresses, pleasure expresses through us is going to be wholly different dependent upon our constitution. So I hope we can really start there and understand that. Now, amidst that, so starting from there were small indicators that were given in the original texts and from the original masters. There were a few indicators that were given of what is seen as a healthful bleed for all women. And the following were said. that the blood would be bright red in color. So there would be this clarity of the color, that it truly would be clear to Raja, to blood. And that also the bleeding would last around 5 days and not more. There would be no foul odor. So a lot of us know the differences also when our menses is expressing itself without order and with, and that there be a moderate flow. So of course that question comes up for all of us. You know, what is a moderate flow? And also that there wouldn't be any pain or mood swings, etc., and that it be easily washable. It doesn't stain. So this not staining. And at Rasa Ayurveda, we have these EcoFem pads, which are just such a beautiful project because there are these washable menstrual pads made out of organic cotton. And for every pad that's purchased, a pad is given to a young woman in southern India. So we just love supporting this organization. It's just so beautiful. And menstrual awareness and education is also given in these communities. So I just love what they're doing, and that's why we support them. But the reason I'm mentioning is because a lot of us don't know whether it stains or not, because we use so many various products that cut us and disconnect us from our bleed. Currently, I am giving a 10-hour Ayurveda and women's Tantra course, and we go much more into these things, but I'll be able to tickle, our interest on some of these different areas for today. But if you have more questions or if you want to join, we've only started one class thus far, so you could always join and hop in and get the recording from the first class. So this staining, when you use these washable pads, you can truly see, is this easily washable? Or is it heavily stained? So this was offered in the original texts of Ayurveda in clarity about some of the indicators, no matter what your constitution, no matter what age, of what a natural bleed should look like. So again, what are some of the things we mentioned? That there be no foul odor, that the bleed not be more than 5 days, that there be moderation also in the bleed, that there be no pain, and that there also be no staining. All of these things in combination, we can all ask ourselves and say, and the bright red in color, I didn't mention that again. Many of us can question, okay, that's not necessarily what's happening for me, right? Like, is that happening for me each month, or is it happening in general? So those can be some indicators already that even if it comes a little bit sooner, or it manifests that moderation for me is a little bit different than for another woman, do I have these indicators there? So what we'll do now is I'm going to go through for each one of the constitutions, for each one of the doshas, Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, how menstruation can manifest, both how it naturally, or what we could call in a more prakruti, in a more balanced way will manifest, but also what are oftentimes the complications or the challenges that we find when the elements of that dosha are out of balance. Now, what I want to say about that is, and this may be new for some of you, and that's why I say to do some reading also off of our website or elsewhere about the doshas in Ayurveda, is we can be an individual whose constitution is naturally more pitta or vata or kapha. So that's our prakruti, that's our original nature. But we can have an imbalance of one of the other doshas, or two of the other doshas, or three of the other doshas, meaning elements can get askew in our system, not necessarily just of what our nature is. So for example, in my structure, I tend to be a more pitta vata prakruti. This means my constitution has more fire as well as some air and ether. Now we all have all 5 elements. And what are the 5 elements? We all have earth, water, fire, air, and space. All 5 of these have to live in every being for all of the functionalities, both of this body and also of this mind to occur, and of our energy system. We need all 5 elements. But Prakruti, our original constitution, says that we're born in a uniqueness where certain elements are more at the forefront. They animate us more. And that's what I was mentioning before. And that's the expression of our being. So my being tends to have more of this fire, especially at the forefront, with some air and ether. But this never changes, but it can be affected, and we can have a vikruti, a current state that's not in alignment with what's natural for us. So for me, naturalness looks like having some fire in this body. Like right now, I'm really hot. So heat comes, right? Heat can come also on my skin. So you can see already, the beginnings of summer and the freckles start to come and some of the warmth starts to come out everywhere, right? So this heat starts to come out. The fieriness, you can even see it in my eyes, the expression of someone's eyes, right? I can't deny it, that there's some level of fire that's here. Then even you can see, on my body, some of the freckles, and throughout my life also, I've always been challenged a bit with skin things. This is the heat trying to express itself. And constitutionally, in my mentality, I tend to have some of these fiery qualities, which means things like being driven, being straightforward, right? Some of those qualities can live here. And those of you who know me know that. So that can come up, but other qualities hopefully as well come with the fire, the passion, and all of these such things. So in that way, this is a naturalness for me. For another person to have these things happen in their body or also in their mind may be very foreign. It's like, no, that's not my natural place. For others of us, we might feel more kapha at the forefront of our being. And we might feel like, oh, okay, I feel more slowed and steadied, patient, calm. My skin tends to be actually very smooth and youthful and, well plumped, etc. And my mind has a certain constancy and again, this patience to it, stability to it. You see, but in my structure, this fire is quite natural. This is what's been here throughout the life. Now, if I were to travel a lot, which I used to do a lot. So if I was traveling here and there and, offering retreats and on an airplane and moving about, what tends to happen in the system is that fire might get out of balance, or let's say that the air element, because I'm traveling and having a different schedule all the time, I'm out in the air or up in the air and out in space. And if that started to happen, got a little wobble. If that started to happen, then the air and ether start to increase in my system more than the naturalness of my fire. And if that starts to happen, I could see all sorts of expressions. And this is what we say is a vikruti. A vikruti is our current state that may cause imbalances and may start to cause expressions of disharmony. And so those expressions of disharmony might look like a scattered mind, like my mind, I'm forgetful or I'm all over the place. It may also look physiologically like I start to lose weight. So I start to, become more spacious. So the body starts to lose weight or becomes dry or a little bit more cold as well. It might also look like one is starting to enter into all sorts of vata imbalances like constipation, or I start to have bloating. This is air and ether. But what would happen to the menstruation? And this is an important one for all of us to recognize. So even though naturalness in my menstruation might look like a pitta menstruation, which we're going to go through, I may suddenly start having vata symptoms, seeing vata vitiation, seeing vata imbalance. And that vata imbalance will go over we'll look at what that looks like. Understanding this is so important because it shows us then, if we understand what naturalness is for each one of the doshas, and then what imbalance looks like, if these doshas enter in or they're heightened in our system, we can know how to pacify them. And I want us all to know that we don't just get imbalanced in the dosha that we are, or that is our prakriti. That actually the other doshas can animate in our system, and that we can treat that from an Ayurvedic perspective as well. Okay, so let's go through each one of the doshas and what they look like as far as menstruation and balances and imbalances. So when we think of these three doshas, let me put them in the chat just so we're very clear on these three, vata, pitta, and kapha. We want to align them to their elements and also what we call their gunas, their qualities. So vata is air and ether, and it tends to have the qualities of being light and mobile and cold and dry and rough and subtle. All of these qualities are the qualities of vata. So naturally, a vata woman, how would she manifest her menstrual flow? What would it be characterized as? Well, usually for a vata woman, the bleed, for example, will be lighter. She won't have as much of a heavy flow. Also for a vata woman, even the onset of menses early in her puberty, maybe a little bit later because of the dryness in her system. She may be also developing later. So even breast development, bodily development, physiological development, may be a little bit later. And she has less weight as well. So because of that, it may come on later. For a Vata woman, also, the period sometimes can be a little bit later. So the cycle may be more like 30 days, for example, not always these 28 days. So it can go a little bit longer. And now what are some of what I could call the natural, it's hard to say this because they can all feel like imbalances, but the natural kind of side effects or symptoms that one can feel that are fairly normal for a Vata woman around her period. Now, if they go into excess, then that's the time we start to look to see if this is really an imbalance that's arising. So as far as pain, any kind of discomfort that happens for a Vata woman, there can be this kind of aching, kind of prickly pain, and especially in the lower abdomen, but also in the lower back. This is the whole seat of Vata. And even sometimes into the anus. When I have women, they'll say, it's embarrassing to me, but I feel like I get these sharp cramps that move even into the anal sphincter. This is very Vata predominated, actually. So the discomfort or the PMS, if there is any, although a totally healthy period is said to not have this, right? So if there is, or it's moving towards more of a vitiation, more of an imbalance, we'll start seeing a lot of cramping, a lot of pain in especially those areas and in those ways. This can be happening. We can also start to see if Vata is naturally maybe a little bit later, like those 30 days, and maybe the bleed is naturally lighter. If it becomes an imbalance, then a Vata imbalance menstruation would look like the period starts skipping. So maybe we don't have it for 50 days. Maybe we don't have it for 3 months. Then we have it again. One of the qualities of Vata is this chala, this mobility. And what that means is irregularity. So when things are mobile, they're all over the place. So 1 month I have it like this, another month I don't have it. It's skipping all over the place. This is a Vata vitiation. This is a Vata imbalance. Or the period just keeps lengthening, 35 days, 40 days, 45 days. It's like there's so much internal dryness that there's no flow of the menses, of the Raja. So in that way, we can also start to see that there's sort of a natural inclination of each dosha, and that natural inclination might be lighter flow and a longer cycle. Okay. And a little bit maybe of discomfort that might express itself in that way. But when it really starts to express itself more fully, this is an imbalance. And what other things can start to happen also for a Vata woman? Well, psychologically, for women who have more of a Vata constitution, during the time of menses, if there's total balance, we'll notice really very little. But we can feel a little bit lighter, a little bit more spacey. So if she already has the tendencies to be connected to the ethers, to be more inspired, more creative, more enthusiastic, she could feel that more so during the period also, that it heightens it somehow. But a Vata imbalance can look like it starts highlighting all of Vata gone into disease, which is everything from anxiety and nervousness to paranoia and fear and worry, like we feel very unsafe in our space. This is Vata when we start to feel all of that around us and within us. And so during the menstruation, this can heighten this with the drop and the change in the female hormones in progesterone and also in estrogen. So a woman can start to feel even more anxious. And it's important to notice if we have these cycles, if we have the cycle of anxiety that happens with the period especially, then noticing for some reason I'm having a Vata manifestation of my menses. Do I generally have a Vata imbalance in my structure? Probably yes. And can I pacify this Vata? And as I pacify that Vata, it will not only help and work towards bringing ease to the menstruation, but I may notice other symptoms in my life that are also starting to be eased. So again, we can absolutely give things to the symptomologies. For example, direct castor oil packs are a wonderful one for Vata cramping and pain. Putting castor oil packs on the lower abdomen and even castor oil packs on the lower back as well can be very helpful. We can use other specific herbs for symptomatic approach of what may be going on as far as a light bleed. But really what we need to work with is a general pacification of a vata imbalance. And then the menstruation will no longer express in this way. Before I go to that, let me though also mention that the quality of the blood during the menstruation, if vata gets really imbalanced, can start to get darker. So rather than this red blood, we can start to have blood that's very dark, brown, black. It can become almost like dry, not the larger clots. We see this more in kapha, but almost like little tiny granules. It can also be that that we completely lose, as I said before. It's like we're not bleeding. So that happens for some months at a time, or it becomes spotting, lots of little spotting, nothing more. So we just see these bits of spotting that start to happen also. Even the blood can look a bit frothy, like there's a lot of air. And the whole area can also feel dry rather than feeling moist, with the flow of the menstruation. So all of those things can start to happen, as well as feeling in the area of the vaginal canal of the yoni, a tightening, like feeling this tight, dry, coldness, hardness, roughness. So for vata women or for vata imbalanced women, it can be like using a cup or using something like a tampon can feel very uncomfortable, or even using a pad and the rub can feel uncomfortable on the area at the time because of this feeling of dryness and tightness that can enter into the area. And as far as elimination for vata imbalances in the menstruation, we can start to see constipation. Now, generally for vata women, there can be a little bit of this that starts to occur, like a feeling like the flow is a little bit less during the period. But when it really starts to express itself into full-blown constipation, then we have a vata imbalance at play here in the menstruation. So what do we do? So how do we work with this, right? So as I said before, we work with the root, which is this generalized vata imbalance. And I even welcome you to put some things into the chat if you know about these, what kinds of things you would generally do to balance and pacify vata in any form, in any expression, actually. So if there's anything you feel to put there, you can as well. But as I mentioned, the qualities of vata, so the elements of air and ether, and the qualities, like I said before, that dryness, coldness, roughness, subtleness, mobility, lightness, all of those qualities. Whenever we see those qualities expressing more and more and more in the system, in any way, including in our menstruation, we want to bring the opposite. So we bring the opposite qualities. So what are the opposite qualities? And then, as Annika wrote here, nourish, oil massage, warm foods, drinks. We want to absolutely bring warmth. So we want to bring warmth. And we also, in some of the things she's mentioning the quality also of heaviness or density, guru. So feeling this heaviness in comparison to the lightness, feeling also the warmth in comparison to the cold. And then also bringing moisture, like drinking things, having warm beverages, using maybe some oils, doing all of this so that we feel less dry also. So a heaviness, a warmth, feeling stability, and oiliness, and a liquidity. So we can do this in different ways. And in Ayurveda, we always highlight using a trifold chikitsa. So chikitsa means treatment or medicine. And this threefold treatment or medicine is by applying, for pacification of any dosha, applying right diet, applying right lifestyle, and also applying the right use of the five senses. So taking plant medicine through the five senses. So firstly, what is right diet? For vata pacification, it's all of these qualities, having things that are more heavy and warm and oily. So think about, for example, your favorite risotto, right? So kind of like, or rice pudding, or what we call in the Ayurvedic tradition, kanji, this kind of warm rice with lots of ghee and spices as a morning breakfast dish. Or khichdi, this mixture of rice and mung beans as well. It's a wonderful mixture that's very vata pacifying, especially if we add a good amount of unctuousness of oils or of ghee. It can help to really bring a stability, a solidity, an oiliness, a heaviness. So vata pacification looks like bringing all of those qualities. Your favorite oatmeal. not skipping meals, making sure to have regularity so that the belly isn't empty. You see, another thing that can happen for a lot of Vata women that I didn't say before, or women who have Vata imbalances, is bloating during the menstruation. So the whole area starts to be filled or feel like it's filled with excess air. So by eating foods that are warming and eating constantly, and this isn't just during the time of our menses. The menses, again, is an expression. So we want to be doing this all month long. And then we'll notice that our menstruation will significantly change. When I was 13, I got my first period. I had my first moon. And the first couple bleeds I remember were quite easeful. You know, it was just discovering in many ways. And then I got, which is very common for young Pitta active women, which is that I got excessive bleeding. So I would start to bleed for 10 days at a time, for 2 weeks at a time, a lot of bleeding to the point that I started to have iron deficiency and anemia. And then, of course, I would have fatigue, all sorts of things started to happen. And at that time, of course, I didn't know, well, not of course, but I didn't know about Ayurveda. And so the doctor simply prescribed the pill. So even though I wasn't sexually active, I was put on the pill to help regulate the menstruation. And it took me a few years to discover in my teens that this wasn't something I resonated with or something that I wanted to be on. So I think around 19, I stopped taking the pill. And it took some years to express and to see what the true balance and the true unfolding and the liberated, boundless unfolding was of my menstruation. And those first bleeds, I remember getting them in this heavier way again. So after going off the pill, it was like they were starting to express themselves in this heavied way. And I remember all the discomfort and the cramping and the PMS that would show up also as anger, especially, and irritation, a lot of heat in the body. And there was, again, this yearning to reach for something to mask it, you know, this yearning to stuff the symptoms. But through the grace and the gift of, you know, some travels and some wisdom to Ecuador and also to Mexico, I started to come more and more in contact with what I would call Ayurveda of those lands, right? How the women treated the menstruation, the freedom of that time, the foods that they ate, the things that were done. And I started to notice very early on this idea and this recognition that the menstruation was only expression of what I had been doing the rest of the month. And this is why I'm tying the story into what I'm sharing with you all now. I started to notice that I would, at the beginning, just try to do things around the menses to make it better, to make it less uncomfortable. And then it started to become very clear, because I dropped alcohol, I started to become plant-based, there was a lot of changes, that the menstruation was a direct expression of all of the ways I spent my days prior to that in the month. And so I share this with all of you because when we say, how do we pacify these expressions into the menstruation, it isn't that we do this or we eat Vata pacifying foods just during our menses. It's all month long. And then you start to notice, okay, what is the effect when my menses do come? Or what is the effect when my ovulation occurs? Like, what is the effect both in the follicular and the luteal phase? So in both of those phases, what's the difference that I'm noticing? What's the difference I'm noticing in the expression of all of the various expressions of my being? So this Vata pacifying diet can be wonderful to especially adhere to during the time of the menstruation, especially if we're experiencing constipation or we're experiencing bloating, to really stay true to not having dry, light, cold foods, not the time, but also throughout the month. So that's the first thing, the diet. Then in our lifestyle, we can do things, like I said before, using castor oil packs. Again, using the castor oil pack throughout the month, even once or twice weekly, not just during the menses. Now, you can also use it daily during the menstruation for a Vata woman. When I have Pitta women, I rarely suggest that they use the castor oil pack during their menstruation. And the reason for that is because of all the heat that it can generate, actually. So again, these are practices to be done throughout the month to notice the difference that this might bring to your bleed, to the cramping, to all that's held. Castor oil really helps to nourish. So when Annika was writing about oil massage, we don't actually in Ayurveda suggest that a woman takes rest from abhyanga, from full body massage. Oil massage during menstruation. But for a Vata woman, this oil massage just once or twice during the period, I've noticed can be helpful actually, or at least doing the castor oil massage on the space of the abdomen, because it really brings such a density and such a pacification. And it's known for its osmotic effects. So it almost draws out the coldness from the area, draws out the pain from the area. So it's a wonderful one. And you can look up castor oil packs or find reference to them also on the Ross Ayurveda website. What other things can be done in our lifestyle? Well, anything that pacifies that dosha. So when we say a Vata pacifying lifestyle, it's especially helpful to have more scheduling, more routine, and especially to have more scheduling with our circadian rhythms, our daily rhythms, which will also translate into our lunar rhythms. So into our rhythms with the moon. So getting up at the same time, going to bed at the same time, having a real scheduling with this. What I can also say about this is the most important thing that I've noticed for all women for helping to balance the menstruation is starting to bring a renewed relationship with the lunar cycle, with the moon. So moon gazing, what we call Chandra Trataka, is a powerful practice in the lifestyle for everyone, not just for Vata women or Vata imbalances. So being with the moon every evening and gazing for 1 minute, 2 minutes, 10 minutes. With the sun, we suggest a smaller amount of time because the sun is bright and burning and only at sunrise and sunset. But the moon is soft. And so because of that, we can be with her for longer. So moon gazing, moon bathing is a wonderful one. Now, for a Vata woman, doing this nightly can be excellent to bring a relationship to the lunar rhythms, but she's also cooling. So we don't want to be just doing lunar bathing or just doing lunar focus. For a Pitta woman, in contrast, sometimes being a lot with the moon, even using moonstone, can be very helpful to cool out some of the heat that might be manifesting in and through her period. Slowing down during the menstruation is also so important for Vata. So taking some time of true slowness. When Vata tends to race, we increase this air and space element. So of course, bringing pacification to that in the daily life, but then also during the menstruation. Can you take a period of red tent? Can you take a period where you stop, you slow down, where you have real scheduling, where you take those as honoring days, where you can be with yourself, where you can allow your creativity to be born also, and really be quiet and on the earth as much as possible, gentle walks, etc., gentle restorative yoga. These are wonderful things for Vata pacification all the time, but also during the menstruation. And also drinking. So the liquid aspect is so important, especially for Vata imbalances in the menstruation that we mentioned. So hydration. Warm liquids are so helpful, and healthy oils. So whether we're taking flax oil or we're taking ghee or hemp seed oil, or we might also be taking sesame oil, all of these can be very helpful for internal snehapana, for internal oiling. But we also want to drink nice warm beverages. Maybe it's our golden milk, for example, because it brings a creaminess, a richness, it has all of those qualities and also a warmth. Or maybe it's just generally that we're drinking, for example, a jeera tea, a jeera pani. So this is cumin water. Warm cumin water can be very helpful for balancing the digestion and also balancing some of the cramping that might be happening, as well as fennel water can be a helpful one for some of the gas that might come for women during the menstruation with Vata imbalance. So please put in the chat if you have any questions before I move to the next one, before I move to Pitta and then to Kapha. But these are the things that can be especially helpful. Now, the third thing that I mentioned before is supportive herbs and supportive ingestion through the five senses. So for Vata, it's especially helpful to use some of the rasayana, some of the herbs that are create more density. So for example, Shatavari is an excellent one that we use both for Vata and Pitta conditions. These herbs should always be used when you're with a practitioner. So to really truly know, and to find out whether or not they're appropriate for you. We also use ashwagandha, and dashamula is also a wonderful one as well. So I really like the use of dashamula, which is 10 different roots. So this can be excellent to use. But even simple herbs like using fennel and cumin, as I was mentioning before, those are wonderful ones to help with some of the imbalances. Ginger is also an excellent one to have for a vata period, and it can really help with some of the cramping that can be occurring as well. And like I said before, turmeric milk or turmeric latte or something like a golden milk is a really helpful one. So please, yes, put questions if you have them. And let's move now to pitta. So for pitta women, the menstruation, as I mentioned before, tends to be more quick, hot, sharp. So pitta is that combination of water and fire. So the coming together of water and fire expresses in the qualities of what? It expresses in the qualities of heat. So the body, the mind tend to be more heated. It expresses also in the qualities of sharpness, fastness. It also expresses in being more subtle and light. So all these qualities are there for pitta. So what do we want to do if we start to notice a pitta imbalance? We bring the opposite qualities. But a natural manifestation for a pitta woman of a period is, like we said before, all those balanced qualities, right? The red blood, not more than 5 days, etc. But the tendency, as I mentioned to you before, is that the period can be a little bit shorter, can be 26 days, 25 days, somewhere there. An imbalance is when it gets really short, or it starts oscillating in that shortness, or it just keeps decreasing also. Also, a woman will tend to have, a pitta woman will tend to have the strongest flow of all 3 doshas. So for her, moderate will look different than a vata or a kapha woman. She'll have a strong bleed, usually for 2 or 3 days of her menstruation. And this is normal for a pitta woman. Now, as far as PMS, I always get asked about this one. Should we not all be a little bit irritated during our menstruation? And it's a funny one, when women ask me this. Usually pitta women, or if we have pitta vitiation, pitta imbalance, we tend to have this irritation. Now, a little bit of irritation, a little bit of fire, a little bit of a feeling that that fire is increasing is one thing, because this is the natural, unique way for a pitta woman. But if we start to feel like we are angry at everything and everyone and the world around us, and we start to have also, even some of the dysmorphia that can happen, and some of the angry outbursts that can happen when pitta gets really, really vitiated, then this is something to notice. If rage and extreme intolerance and any of those things are happening, this is a pitta imbalance. So mentally, emotionally, that's what we see in pitta when it comes into imbalance, is that there'll be irritation, there'll be anger, there can be over assertion and aggression. All of those things can be there. Rage, explosive episodes also during. I had one patient once, she said, Tiffany, I think I'm starting to track and notice. She said, about 5 years ago, I got really angry during a breakup and drove in circles on my then ex-husband's lawn, right? Something like this. And he said to me, it's okay. I think you're on your period. And she said, I got even, it's the exact thing not to say. She said, but from that moment, I thought, yes, there are circumstances that make us angry, but it's gone too far. This has gone way too far. And she was laughing about it, And so literally this level of anger or craze that can happen is actually, there's a reason for it. There's this extreme pitta imbalance that can happen. So over the years, she started to bring balance, thankfully. But some women do express this during the period. And that's why even sadly, we see some of the highest cases of female suicide are during the menstruation, because of the feelings of everything from anxiety to this anger, to also depression that can come with kapha imbalance. So this is important to note. If we start feeling extreme imbalances on a mental, emotional level, starting to notice this. Now, physically, what are physical manifestations of imbalance? It's natural that pitta women will feel more warmth. So generally more warm in the day, more warmth in the space of the womb and the whole area of the abdomen. But it's another thing if they start, and warm also at night, like warm when we're sleeping. But it's another thing if we start feeling almost like hot flashes, burning sensations, burning in the yoni, burning cramps, burning pain. This starts to be a pitta imbalance. Also, if we start each time getting acne or hormonal acne, this tends to relate to more pitta imbalance, or cystic, very strong acne that starts to express itself during the period, especially. Or we start to feel extreme burning in various areas, and inflammation. So if there's a lot of inflammation, we can have swelling in a pitta and in a kapha period. It tends to be more that people relegate it to kapha menstruation, but if it's heated swelling, like inflammatory swelling, then this is something to see, like the whole area, or different areas of the body, but the whole area feels engorged. The labia feel heated and swollen. This is all more pitta imbalance that can start to happen. So the menstruation naturally, again, is to be this red, but if it starts to have more like a yellowish color, it can even be like a yellow red, or if the actual quality of the menstruation gets so profuse, like flowing out so profusely, or hot, pitta imbalance will often express itself, and women will say, it feels like a hot liquid is moving out of me. So this heat starts to happen. And the other thing that's more common is that it gets smelly. So in a pitta imbalance, the menstruation can start to have this smelliness to it. And that's very marked. The same thing with discharge. Discharge can also be seen in that way in pitta imbalance. So we get a cue about that also around our ovulation. And if we're having more smelly discharge, it has something to say about pitta within the structure. Other imbalances in the physical body. Diarrhea is a common one for pitta imbalance. So pitta women will tend to have a little bit more loose stools during the period, but if it's imbalanced, it tends to move towards extreme diarrhea. So it could be multiple times per day, or having really loose stools. Also, I mentioned before acne, tender breasts. So that's that inflammatory things that can happen as well. And acid reflux, sometimes feeling like burning in the digestive tract, gut pain, those kinds of things are more of these heated things, as well as migraines and headaches. So headaches during the menses especially tend to relate more to pitta imbalance. So what do we do? Again, I really welcome you to write it down in the chat if you feel to put in the chat what might be there for pitta balancing. So if we think about the opposite qualities, we want to think about those qualities again of heat and mobility and foul smell and subtleness and lightness, and bring the opposite for pitta. And so especially for a pitta woman or women who are experiencing pitta imbalance in the menstruation, we want to bring a coolness for them. We want to cool things out, bring coolness and serenity. So, and also softness. So how do we do that in the diet? We have a pitta diet. Exactly. And you, Annika, wrote it, rest and cooling down. So one thing is with the diet, how can we have things that are more calming? We avoid really spicy foods. We avoid extremely acidic foods and sour foods. And we avoid also eating very quickly. This is a tendency with pitta. And we avoid tons of oils as well. And then we have a more light kind of plant-based, clean, soothing diet. This is the best possible thing for pitta. And we can even have cooling beverages. So for example, before I mentioned cumin water, this can be good, but also coriander or CCF tea is a really good one. Cumin, coriander, and fennel to bring coolness into the body can be very, very good. Also for pitta women, the lifestyle needs to be this calming down. Again, red tenting is one thing during the menstruation, but also throughout the month, are we relieving stress? If there is a lot of stress in the system, then that stress will be very clearly expressed into the period. We will see that the period time will be stressful, and a woman will feel stressed during her period, in measure to how stressed she's been also in the month. So that stress is a huge one for pitta that expresses. So finding ways to have joy, enjoyment, relaxation throughout the month, but then especially during the period. Rest days, not working as much, being more relaxed, not taking care of absolutely everything at home as much as possible, trying to bring more serenity to our days and to the life. And then other things that we can do in the lifestyle and the things that are offered from an Ayurvedic context. So, for example, using oils in our space or aromatherapy in our space. This can be for all the doshas, but for Pitta, using things like rose or sandalwood, even using coconut oils or sandalwood oil can be very helpful. So sometimes I'll welcome women to use coconut oil on the area of the belly rather than the castor oil because it's so heating, and to put a drop or two of rose or lavender into this, essential oils. Or, for example, to put cooling packs, not super cold, but something that we might be mildly cool, or a cool pack from the fridge that's wrapped in a towel, and to allow this coolness on the area where there's a lot of heat. So it can actually, again, be the opposites of the qualities. Or gently sitting or bathing in some cool waters can be helpful sometimes for Pitta women as well. Breast massage is a helpful one. So really giving massage to the areas where that inflammation is happening and under the armpits, and just gently massaging into the abdomen. Other things in the lifestyle and during that time. If there are frustrations, if there is stress, it will expose itself during Pitta menstruation. So in that way, journaling, writing things down, really finally letting things out, finding a soft way like journaling to really express these things and move them out of the system. And again, restorative yoga is so helpful. Yin yoga, really lying down, being in shavasana, listening to a nidra yoga that connects us, for example, to water sounds. This is all very, very helpful for Pitta menstruation. And then with herbs, again, shatavari is an excellent one that can be very, very helpful during Pitta menstruation, but also throughout the month. And I like this one because it's cooling and nourishing. So shatavari is an excellent one. Another one that we sometimes use is guduchi as well, which can be quite helpful for Pitta menstruation. You see, it's inexhaustive. I see we're already at our time and I want to go through kapha together, but there are so many things that could be mentioned around this topic. So this gives us some ideas. Another thing I often use with Pitta women is aloe vera and chlorophyll. So using aloe vera juice, drinking aloe vera juice with some chlorophyll in it throughout the month, but also during the menstruation can be very helpful to clear and to cleanse and to cool the whole, what we call the Mutravahashrota, the whole urinary channel, and this whole area because of the heat that can be stored here. So this can be very helpful. Also doing liver cleansing and blood cleansing for Pitta and for Pitta women will really express itself then into a more balanced menstruation. So for example, at Rasa, we have a skin purge potion, which is actually a blood cleanser also. It's an excellent one to clear some of that stored heat in the blood. And doing a liver cleanse every 3 to 6 months can be very helpful for Pitta women or women who are experiencing more Pitta vikruti in the manifestation of their menses. Another herb I had written down here as well is for Pitta women, I find mentally, emotionally, if there's this anger or irritability that's coming up, I really love to use Brahmi as well. Brahmi is an excellent one to calm the mind. Whereas for Vata women, I like using more Jatamamsi and Shankapushpi, especially for the anxiety or the worry or the nervousness. So even using these herbs, not necessarily for the flow, but more for what happens in the mind during that time. Okay, let's come lastly to kapha then, the kapha menstrual flow. So naturally, the kapha menstrual flow, as I mentioned before, because kapha is earth and water, and the qualities of kapha are density and softness, so heaviness, oiliness as well. All of these qualities, and you can think about it, they give to the earth and the water, right? The moistness. There's also a dullness and a cloudiness to kapha. So these qualities, what do they express as in menstruation? It can mean that there's a dull pain, a dull achy pain that happens. But again, if we're in balance, then there should be no pain, in fact. So what a truly balanced, more propensity of a kapha menstruation looks like is it looks like having a stable stability, guru, this heaviness. So the same time every single month, and maybe from the very beginning of our menses. A Pitta young woman can have her period quite early because everything's fast and sharp and she wants to get it quickly and get it done with. Kapha, I notice, can come sometimes later because there's that slow steadiness, but sometimes also earlier because there's early development of the body. So because Kapha women tend to be more voluptuous, have more adipose tissue, this means they tend to be more estrogenic. We may notice that fertility and also menstruation come earlier. So maybe they get it at 11, 12 years. It depends. But from the moment they get it, it has constancy to it. This is very Kapha. It's regimented. And in the same way, the bleed tends to be regimented. And they have secondary to Pitta, a more moderate flow. So if Pitta has a more strong flow, then Kapha will have this more moderate flow. Now, there is a natural feeling for Kapha women of feeling a little bit more heavy during the period, like a little bit more heaviness in the uterus or a little bit more heavy. But besides these expressions, or having a little bit more density, in the body, a little bit of swelling and water retention that happens in the body. But when these really become exaggerated, we end up with what we call a kapha vikruti, a kapha imbalance in the menstruation. And then that is when we see this density, this heaviness becoming overblown. So psychologically, that the individual feels depressed, sad, melancholic, heavy, unmotivated. So all of these things may arise in an extreme. A lot of emotionality and sadness, attachment, nostalgia. These are the kinds of things that can happen, as well as emotional eating, like feeling like we want to satiate through eating or binging, binging on different things, even binging on shows, etc. This is more the sticky quality of kapha. In the physicality, what can happen is, as I mentioned before, that kind of dull, achy pain can be there. And also because kapha has a tendency towards being more sweet, we can also get a bit of a sweet smell, and the achiness that's happening also can be like that heaviness, like I said before, like feeling like the whole uterus has dropped. Everything is very, very heavy. It's holding a lot. And also with the sweet quality, what I wanted to say was it's almost like we can see the effects of candida. There can be itching, a little bit of this feeling of almost like a yeast infection or yeastiness combined with the period. Other things. So if the blood is naturally for a kapha woman, may have a little bit more mucus to it. Like it may be a little bit more pink in its redness, but if it really starts to get very mucousy, if it gets very viscose, it's almost like it's oily blood. If it gets large clots, like big, large clots, all kapha imbalances. So these all show kapha imbalance. Or if it starts to get really light in its color and then heavier and longer flow as well, like that heaviness starts to come into the period, then we're noticing that there's a kapha imbalance. The other things that happen in the body, like I mentioned before, this water retention can become extreme. So we start getting swelling, we start getting a heavy bloating, whereas Vata has this kind of spacious bloating, like a lot of space and air in the belly. We can have a heavy feeling of lethargy in the belly and sluggishness. So sluggishness in the digestion, sluggishness also in the elimination, not quite dry constipation, but everything is quite sluggish, not sluggy. And feeling really sleepy. So another one is for kapha, that sometimes we can feel sleepier at that time, but if we start feeling extreme bouts of wanting to sleep and almost like depressive sleep and oversleeping, this is again an expression of kapha imbalance into the menstruation. So what do we do? So maybe we write this down as well, what we do. So balancing kapha means balancing those qualities, right? Of dullness, of heaviness, of stickiness, of softness, of moistness, of oiliness, and then bringing some of the opposite, which can be that we bring lightness, we bring some warmth also, and we get things flowing. So as Annika wrote, joy and lightness, which is so beautiful. So in the diet, having things that bring warmth is helpful. Like I will often suggest having masala tea, so spiced tea. So like our Tulsi Masala chai that we have at Rasa Ayurveda is an excellent one because it warms everything up. It gets everything warm and moving in the system. So this is a really good one to stimulate our Agni and get it moving. We also have spice mixes, what we call these masala churnas, these spice mixes and digestive tonics at Rasa. And the Kapha spice mix can be wonderful to have all month long, but also during the period to really make sure that we're either mixing it in our food or we're taking it before our foods. And it has excellent spices that help to warm and stimulate the Agni, get everything moving and express in that way. So these are all very, very helpful. So think about, some of the spices like cinnamon and nutmeg and cardamom and black pepper and ginger. These can all be very helpful for balancing and clearing. And then the diet not being too heavy. So if for Vata, we want heaviness. For Kapha, we want more lightness. Lighter soups, very plant-based, and generally having a Kapha pacifying diet, which means avoiding lots of creamy, heavy, oily kind of things and having lighter foods in general. And a plant-based diet is a wonderful one with more steamed vegetables, more lighter grains and whole grains. This is a wonderful one for Kapha in general. But during the period, this will help so much. It's not the time to be having chocolate cake and pizza. So the emotional eating is often not helpful for Kapha during this time. And then the lifestyle for Kapha balancing is to bring, yes, this joy and lightness and energy and enthusiasm. So how can that happen? Well, making sure that we're doing things that we love, that we're connecting with people that we love, we're doing things that energize us, that bring refreshment to our being. Also, we can bring that even into our exercise throughout the month. So having exercise that uplifts, having yoga that gets things moving, like Surya Namaskara can be wonderful. Sun salutations can be really good. Inversions of the body can be really wonderful. Now, during the menstruation, I so often get this question, we're not supposed to do inversions. Actually, this was often proposed by very specific male yoga teachers. Now, we don't want to change the flow of Apana Vayu, the downward flow of the energy during the menses. But for a moment or two, putting the legs up the wall or lifting the body into Sarvangasana, into shoulder stand, can actually be very helpful for a Kapha woman. But generally in her days leading up to the menstruation, doing some of these practices are excellent because they will lighten the energy, lighten the heavy energy. So this is very helpful. And having some time outside, waking up early, very good for Kapha. Having gentle walks, being exposed to sun, all really good for Kapha dosha and Kapha balancing in the lifestyle. Also castor oil packs, because of the coldness that can also, the coolness that can also get into density, using a castor oil pack can be helpful. I suggest Vata to use them consistently, but for Kapha during the menses, maybe 2 to 3 times we might use them. And maybe we use a little bit of a warming oil mixed into the castor oil pack. So using something like a little drop of cardamom or a little drop of ginger, if you have those essential oils, can be very, very helpful. And throughout the month, also doing dry brushing. This is an excellent one that's helpful. So when we do Garshana, when we do the dry brushing, we get the whole lymph system flowing. And when the lymphatic system is draining and flowing properly, and we do this also into the gut and that space, we'll notice that the period is more balanced as well. Now, during the menstruation, this isn't always suggested, but again, you can explore with it to see whether or not it does help you during the period. Although we say to still give rest, like really to give rest this time, at that time. But for Kapha women, to still move, like still get outside, especially get outside of the place of cocoon, because Kapha tends to withdraw. And that depression can be very withdrawing and isolating. So express movement, continue to move, even though we're in deep rest. As far as herbs that we might use, Tulsi is one that I love to use. Now, it's not one that we often think of that is something necessarily for symptomatically for menstruation, but because Tulsi, holy basil, is a decongestant, it decongests and clears the entirety of the body. So, just like when we're doing the dry brushing, it can help with some of the drainage of the water retention and the swelling. Tulsi helps that throughout the whole body, and it can be a slight diuretic. It can be a slight clearing. Purnarnava is also an excellent herb that can be used throughout the month to help with some of the release of excess water retention. And just the simple things I mentioned before, like the masalas and the masala spices. These are simple approaches to using Ayurvedic medicine and herbs. We have more specific ones like Kanchanar Guggulu that we might use in a kapha condition. But again, please work with a doctor or a practitioner around that if you're feeling that you need something more of those qualities. So these are for the 3 doshas, and we're much over time. So I want to see if there is anything that's arising. Or any questions which we can put in the chat, anything that might be there. There's so many other things that, I would love to share. For example, cleansing, having a time of cleansing during the Ritu Sandhis, during the seasonal transitions, especially the one around spring and the one around fall. For all women, this is generally very, very helpful for bringing balance. For all women, having the rest period of the menstruation is very, very helpful. For all women, once in a while, when they have menstrual imbalances, using castor oil packs during the month can be very, very helpful. So there are some things that all of us can use. And meditation, of course, is one of these as well. The more in self-solace we are, and the more we're regulated in our nervous system, we'll also notice that the hormonal system will follow in suit. So yoga, meditation, yoga offers this as far as the meditative nervous system benefits, but also the flow of prana. The more we allow prana to be properly flowing in the system, as women, Shakti, in her landed expressive source of the space of the womb, she'll express with more balance. So lots of things and more things that I could share with you, but if there's any questions, let's put them in the chat. And then I hope that we'll have part 2 or part 3 or other specificities that might come up. Is there anything that's there? Okay. For those of you who are watching this later online, just if you feel to, you can do more research and find more information on our website, or if you're having specific challenges around menstruation or anything in your life, you can always reach out also for a consultation or to come to one of the courses, whether it's the women's course or the 50-hour Ayurveda immersion. So those are all available to you. And I look forward to seeing many of you very soon. I'm going to chant, and then those of us who are live online, we can stay for a moment also. So let's allow the hands to come into the heart space and just allow this to move through you. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Dhanvantaraye Amrita Kalashtaya Sarva Maya Vinashaya Trailokya Nadaya Om Namo Bhagavate Namaha. May this gift of Ayurveda bring true freedom from any existent suffering. May we be free in the abode of our beingness and in the embodiment that has been chosen. This consciousness in form, may it be free, free, free. Om Namaste.